With all the content available to us, almost everybody has a backlog of something, whether it's TV to stream, movies to watch, or even books to read. But for many, specifically myself, it's video games to play. Gaming as a kid meant you played whatever you could get your hands on for as long as you could. A new game was an exciting prospect, and you tried to get every bit of entertainment out of it, because it might be a long time before you set your eyes on a shiny new disc or a small plastic cartridge. Nowadays, with Twitch Prime and Epic Games giving away free games all the time, and the fact that I now don't have to rely on my birthday and Christmas to get a new title, getting new games has become a regular part of life, and with limited time to play everything, sometimes games I've been meaning to check out sit on my desktop collecting digital dust. Out of all the games in my backlog, there was only one I really wanted to play, but for whatever reason, never did. That game was Hyperlight Drifter. Ever since I first heard about it, the game looked pretty intriguing, with a unique and vivid pixel art style, striking imagery, and a fantastic score to boot. I had heard good things about it, and when I got it, I had full intentions to play it, but I just never did. Now, with the global pandemic bearing down on us, presenting me with ample time to play games, I started working through other titles and buying new ones to check out, leaving Hyperlight Drifter behind. But recently, I finally woke up, sat down, and played through the entire game in one day, and I wanted to share my experience with you all. Hey guys, it's Boy83. Hyperlight Drifter is a weird title to me. It feels like it's been a part of my life for years, but at the same time it really hasn't been. I still haven't done everything there is to do in the game, and I don't fully understand the story yet, which I'll get into shortly, but nevertheless I did feel like I needed to share my experience with the game, so here we are. I am going to be getting into some spoilers, and I do think you should play this game blind, but with that in mind, let me take you along on my journey with this title. Hyperlight Drifter, like many of the great indie titles we've gotten in the past decade or so, started as a Kickstarter project looking to raise $27,000 to fund the project. The campaign ended up raising just over $645,000, and after a few years in development, the game released in 2016 to highly favorable reception. This game, however, is more than just another Kickstarter success story. It's art. Hyperlight Drifter was born from the mind of Alex Preston, lead designer and founder of Heart Machine, the studio that developed the game. Preston suffers from a congenital heart disease, which has caused numerous health issues over the course of his life, and with these debilitating health issues, Preston turned to art to express what he was going through, keeping his personal projects private until one fateful hospital visit where he decided he needed to get his work out there, and that work, which had been on Preston's mind since his childhood, became the game that we're talking about today. The best art comes from the heart, and in this case that could not be more accurate. In fact, the name Heart Machine is a reference to all the machines that helped keep Alex Preston alive throughout his whole life. I think it's important to know a game's history with both the player and the developer, which is why I spent so much time introducing this title. But with all that out of the way, let's finally get into what the game actually is and why I think it's art. To put it simply, playing Hyperlight Drifter is like walking through an art gallery. The story is almost told entirely with visuals. In fact, the only text in the game, besides the few tutorials, is written in an in-game language and hidden on monoliths scattered throughout the world. Thanks to the efforts of other players, that text has been fully translated, and it offers great insight into the story, but for the player who doesn't look beyond the game, they have to rely purely on their observations to figure out what's going on. Going back to the art gallery metaphor, every area in this game paints a picture, and just like any given work in a gallery, some are clearer than others. Every inch of this game is littered with details about the world and its history, and there's just enough to get a good idea of what happened without actually knowing the specifics. The best lore details, however, come from NPC interactions. Instead of speaking, certain characters will display a series of images that do a fantastic job of telling you what they know. The map is split into 4 areas in each cardinal direction, all connected by the town hub, and each area has a boss. There's an NPC in each area that tells you how that boss rose to power with a compelling reason for you to take them down. But the area bosses are all their own separate entities, and they're more like tests to get to the main locks than integral parts of the Drifter's story. No, the Drifter's story is where things get complicated, as well as where Alex Preston's condition comes into play. The opening cutscene of the game is powerful yet cryptic. We see these massive titans, a jackal with a diamond halo, dead bodies in a sea of what could be blood, and most importantly, we see that the Drifter has an illness. We don't know what this illness does or how the Drifter got it, though there are theories on that. But we do know that it has a manifestation that goes along with it, and that's a being known as Judgment, which we only know the name of because of a Steam trading card. Over the course of the game, the Drifter coughs up blood, and usually when that happens, Judgment appears and attacks, but this is all in the Drifter's mind. However, the Drifter is not the only one who has this illness. There is another, an NPC named the Guardian by fans. The Guardian saves you at the beginning of the game, and he'll show you where some of the smaller seals in each area are. He'll also show you in a series of images his exploits and his adventure, until you reach the southern area, where they die. This scene hit me very differently. It felt really chilling to see this character that seemed unstoppable just suddenly die of disease. Alex Preston's story didn't make me feel something because I was really invested into it. No, his story made me feel something because out of all the mystery and vagueness that I was trying to uncover, something remained very clear. Disease is sometimes inescapable, and it's always with you. And for that reason alone, I think Hyperlight Drifter has a fantastic story. I'm not going to discuss any more than that because, going off of the art gallery metaphor, this is something you have to explore for yourself. So now let's go into the gameplay, where things get concrete and very challenging. Hyperlight Drifter plays like a Zelda game, with more emphasis on combat than puzzle solving. If it wasn't obvious, the diamond is an important image in this game, serving as the loose shape of the map. Each section of the map is home to 8 triangular shards called modules, 4 being revealed to you by the Guardian, and 4 you'll have to find on your own, and those are very well hidden because I didn't find a single one. You'll need 4 modules from each area to unlock the elevator in the center of town, as well as each area's pillar, which is guarded by the area boss. The objective is straightforward. Explore each area, get the modules, activate the pillars, and head down the center. But there's a lot of complexity in this seemingly basic path. Exploration is done on 2 fronts. Every area has an upper layer on the surface and a lower dungeon-like layer below, with plenty of secret paths and locations in both. Exploration feels great in this game, for the most part, and almost every time I wondered whether something seemingly normal could lead somewhere, I was right. In order to have really good exploration though, you need good movement, and that's where things get a little tricky. I love games with good movement mechanics. If a game is fun to move in, then that's a game I'm going to play for a long time. For this game, there's only one extra movement option besides running around, and that's the dash. It's a simple dash with a cool after image effect, but it has a lot of uses. It lets you dodge enemies, cross gaps, and it's the key to finding most of the secrets in this game. Normally after you dash, you have to wait a brief period of time before you can dash again, but there is an upgrade you can get called the chain dash, which lets you chain dashes together, negating the cooldown period. However, this dash is not exactly easy to pull off in practice. You have to time your dash right, and I never could figure that out for some reason. But thankfully it's not essential to actually beating the game, but it is key to finding a lot of the harder secrets to get, and trust me, there are plenty of those. While you only need 4 modules to finish the game, getting all 8 modules in an area unlocks a gate which leads to new weapons and outfits. There's also the monoliths, though that's just for lore if you want it. Finally, and even more hidden than the modules, are the 16 keys throughout the world, which unlock a separate set of gates depending on how many keys you have. These primarily give you new outfits, which do grant unique abilities of their own, as well as offering some cosmetic enhancements. I only found a few monoliths and 2 keys throughout my playthrough, and if they're that well hidden, I can imagine you're in for some quality game time looking for them all. But exploration is only half the battle. The other half is battling itself, and though it was frustrating at times, this game has a really cool combat system. You're going to be doing a lot of fighting in this game, and fortunately it does not get old. Combat is very fast, fluid, and simplistic. Your loadout consists of a lightsaber-esque sword and a laser gun that can be swapped out for other laser-based weapons once you unlock them throughout the game. Your primary damage is going to come from your sword, and guns have a specific amount of ammo, which your sword gradually recharges as you hit enemies, so you can't go guns blazing all the time, and you probably shouldn't anyway because the combat requires a sometimes infuriating amount of precision. Many of the battles in this game feel like puzzles, and rather than randomly spawning enemies, they're all placed intentionally. Every skirmish is set up to where if you don't figure out the right way to proceed, you're going to die very quickly. Though your maneuvers are limited to running and dashing your way around foes, those options are more than sufficient if used correctly. You can also swap between two guns on the fly without having to pause and change them, giving you two different approaches at all times. I personally like using the rifle and the shotgun for long-range precision and a very powerful close-range burst. Fortunately, unlike some other games, you can pretty much use whatever guns you want to whenever you want to, though some secret areas will be infinitely easier to get to with certain guns over others. Now, while your arsenal is limited, there is an upgrade system that gives you some very useful abilities in exchange for gear bits. Gear bits are collectibles you can find throughout the world and when you kill specific enemies. Every 4 gear bits earns you a gear bit pack, which you can use to purchase upgrades to your health and ammo, new abilities, and even a bomb, which I didn't end up purchasing, but it is there if you want it. Gear bits are more on the uncommon side, so I found myself having to pick and choose my upgrades, which is actually a pretty good thing. The amount of upgrades and abilities to get is also on the smaller side, however these are very impactful. The chain dash, while hard to use, especially during combat, is extremely helpful when done correctly. The dash shield gives you some immunity on your hitbox while you dash, and the sword deflection lets you play baseball with your enemies' projectiles. You'll need these all, because these enemies and bosses are tough. There's a surprising amount of enemy variety in this game, and every new area has its own unique enemies with their own unique ways to kill you. Normally there's always at least a few enemies in a game that I just hate dealing with, and fortunately in this game there was only one. That being these little rocket launcher dudes. They were fine to deal with when there was only one in a room, but you put 2 in there and it became a nightmare. But what's some combat without bosses? And I actually thought the bosses in this game were really good, except for one where you had to be very proactive with your dashes. But for the most part, they all had very clear ways to deal with them, but without being too easy to take out. Most of the fights took me only 3 or 4 tries, give or take, and I thought they were really good and I was satisfied with them overall. But what really hooked me into this game was not the gameplay. It was the jaw-dropping visuals and the beautiful soundtrack composed by Disaster Peace. Hyperlight Drifter looks like nothing I've ever seen before, and trust me, I've played a lot of games. Its pixelated art style may seem like a drop in a sea of the countless 8, 16, and high-bit games that are already out there, but that's just flat out untrue. Hyperlight Drifter owns its art style, and it leaves a lasting impression. Every environment is just breathtaking, giving you many shots that just blew my mind and look straight out of a painting. When I said this game was a work of art, I meant it in its entirety, but the artwork in this game stands on its own. Each area is so distinct in terms of design and color, and the scenery brings the world to life perfectly. The Drifter has a very simplistic design, but his animations are flashy, and I have to say, I absolutely love that after imaging effect on his dash. It just looks so clean every single time. The enemies and townsfolk also have the same kind of feel. Their animations just add such a layer of character. Bosses are so intricately detailed, and their movements feel weighty and powerful. I loved the color choices of this game, with vibrant neon shades of everything. Heck, even the blood looks aesthetically pleasing. Not only does everything look fantastic, but there's so much relevant detail everywhere you look for it. These decaying titans, their wounds, and their weaponry scattered around each location tell you exactly how they were killed and how serious the battle was. The dead bodies lying around tell you how that location's boss rose to power and what effects it had on the world. I could ramble on and on about how good this game looks, but art has to be able to speak for itself, and I genuinely believe every single frame of this game is a masterpiece. Yes, photorealistic graphics are impressive and look great, but when a game takes on its own style and does it right, I think that blows any and all realism out of the water, and that definitely applies here. One of my favorite things about video games are the soundtracks. I love listening to video game music. To be blunt, it just sounds great. Game soundtracks are my go-to music for just about anything, and there's a massive amount of high-quality tracks out there. But one of the best parts about video game music is the memories you can make with it. If it's done well, a song from a game can instantly remind you of all the memories you've made with that song. I listened to the soundtrack of Hyperlight Drifter well before I played the game for whatever reason, and I don't really remember why. But listening to the soundtrack first and playing the game in one day later did not help me make memories with the game, unfortunately. However, this soundtrack is a masterpiece. While I didn't get that game soundtrack experience as soon as I started listening to it for the first time, I knew this was special, and it really is. Disasterpeace, the composer, brought something incredible to the table with his work on the game. With all this neon, it makes sense that the soundtrack is incredibly synth-heavy, but instead of upbeat tunes, the soundtrack here is super atmospheric. To be honest, one of the reasons I didn't make any memories with any individual tracks is the songs just blend into everything you're doing so well that you kind of forget they're even there. I can't really decide whether that's a good or bad thing because I already knew how good this OST was before I played the game, but I would hate for anyone playing to miss out on really listening to the game's score. Explaining why I like music beyond simply saying it sounds good is not my strong suit, but I think the main theme, Panacea, perfectly encapsulates why I think the soundtrack is so good. Panacea is a very simple song. It's just a piano playing simple phrases with space in between. But more than any song in the game, this song just makes you feel. It has this sad but hopeful emotion that it carries throughout each phrase, feeling like a slow and painful footstep forward, but forward it continues. It's peaceful, elegant, and knows how to use space perfectly. By far and away, this is the best song in the game, but they all do a wonderful job of making you feel something, whether it's just setting the mood of the environment it plays in or emphasizing a boss encounter in a way that really impressed me. If you aren't interested in playing the game, I insist the next time you sit down to do some homework or work on a project, consider putting away your favorite Spotify playlist and giving the soundtrack of Hyper Light Drifter a listen. I promise you it's well worth your time.
It should be pretty clear by now that I thought this game was great. However, it is definitely not without its flaws, some of which I have mentioned and some of which I haven't. I never would have figured out how to use the chain dash if I hadn't looked it up online because the in-game tutorial does not tell you how to do it accurately, and I still never figured out the timing, so I didn't really get to use it as much as I would have liked to, which sucked. I also had a problem with health pack distribution. The game was needlessly tense a lot of the time because I was always low on health, and health packs were kind of spread out in groups, so I'd find like 3 and then wouldn't find any for a while longer, and that was just not that great because it made the game a little bit harder than it should have been. I also had a problem with some exploration stuff, so occasionally some of the hidden areas were hidden in the walls, and you had to hug the wall in each area and just kind of hope there was a gap in between it so that you could go through to a new place, and this was actually necessary at a few parts, which was not that great. I would have liked it better if it was only secret areas, and I would have liked it even better if they either had a clear way of showing you where these gaps were, or they weren't in the game at all, but oh well. I also had a few glitches in my playthrough, but they really weren't a big deal at all. They were just kind of collision detection issues, and there weren't very many at all, and I didn't notice them that much, so not a big deal. These were issues that I had. They weren't that significant, though. They definitely didn't make me hate the game or like it less, but I would have liked it if these were fixed.
After putting it off for so long, I'm really glad I finally played through Hyper Light Drifter. It's a really unique game that brings a lot to the table. Despite my issues with it, Alex Preston more than achieved his vision of using art to share his life with heart disease. This game delivers a really powerful experience that draws you into its world till you finally reach the end. Heart Machine's first title is incredibly promising, with a game that delivers in every single aspect. With an easily accessible mobile port that adds extra content and only costs $5, I highly recommend picking up Hyper Light Drifter on any device you fancy. Don't make the same mistake I did and give this game a shot. Hyper Light Drifter set a high bar for Heart Machine to pass, and if Solar Ash Kingdom, their next title, can even reach it, then we're in for something really special.
Thank you all for watching this video. I put a lot of effort into it and I hope it paid off. I don't know if I'm going to continue to make content, but if you guys are watching it, then I will definitely try my best to keep making it. So consider supporting my channel in whatever way you'd like to. Anyway, that's all from me. See you guys in the next one.